And so you can create the pool and say trading opens next Thursday, or a specific point in time. And this means that orders can all be placed, but they can't be executed. The smart contract won't allow them to be executed. And then when that market open time happens, the scoopers will process all of the orders from before the market open in a random order. Creator of a liquidity pool can define an initial fee and then a final fee, and when it should reach that final fee, and then the fee will decay over time.
Hey guys, what's going on? Paul here. Welcome back to another Cardano video. And today I'm sitting down with Pi once again. He's been on the channel a few times before to talk about different technical aspects around Cardano and also talk about SundaeSwap. Today it's going to be focused on SundaeSwap and V3, which is out on preview right now, and the white paper should now be out. Links to it will be down below if you want to check that out. But we're going to go through a high level of it here. Pi, very welcome back on, and thanks for taking the time as usual.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'll say we're recording this ahead of time, but I'll say to your audience, happy Valentine's Day. And we hope you enjoy the white paper, but I'm excited to finally be able to talk about, all of the features that we're including in Sundae V3.
Nice. So I'm going to presume everyone watching this knows you. Just give it 30-second who you are, and then we're going to jump straight into what is Sundae V3.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Pi Lanningham, Pi like the number. I'm a mathematician by passion, programmer by trade, and I am the CTO at Sundae Labs. So we're behind the SundaeSwap protocol, which was the first AMM DEX on Cardano, and really just trying to be, a pillar in the space in terms of pushing it forward technologically and governance-wise and things like that. So,
okay, so SundaeSwap V3, what is V3 there? And also, just to clarify for people around, Plutus V2 has become a fairly common topic of projects need to move to that. And can you talk about you being V3 and it being V2 and what the clarifications are there?
Yeah, version numbering is hard. So basically, Sundae V3 is the next proposed set of contracts for the Sundae protocol. So this is the smart contracts that underpin the AMM trading formula and placing orders and things like that. The reason why it's called V3 instead of V2 is because for two reasons, really. One, we did a big rewrite of the UI about a year ago, and we kind of marketed that as the V2 UI. And then when we started talking about doing a V2 of the contracts, people got really confused when we were trying to, well, why you just did a V2? Why are you doing another V2? So that being said, now that we're doing a V3, a whole different set of people are confused about that, so you kind of can't win. But also, there is a set of the contracts that we wrote in Plutus TX that we're upgrading it to support Plutus V2 that, we spent some effort and we kind of realized it was going to be a really underwhelming launch if we went with those contracts, because while they got some scalability improvements, it wasn't kind of night and day, and it didn't have a lot of features. And so we made the decision to go with Aiken, rewrite our contracts in Aiken, and take the opportunity to add, a bunch of new features. Surely not every idea that we had, because we've got a lot of them, but enough that, we feel like it will kind of position the SundaeSwap protocol really well for the next year or two. And so, for both of those reasons, we decided to, call that version, that unreleased version of the smart contracts, Plutus or Sundae V2, or the V2 contracts, and then focus on, okay, this is Sundae V3, and kind of move forward from there.
Okay, so this is Sundae V3, but Sundae V3 is Plutus V2 scripts, which people will have heard about the push to get to there. And actually, there is an update on your SIP as well. You did put in a SIP that should help Plutus V1 scripts and not. Do you want to just give the quick mention of what that is, for people who mightn't have heard of that?
Yeah, so Plutus V1, Plutus V2, you've kind of heard these terms. What this refers to is kind of the version of the virtual machine that runs the scripts in a transaction. So it says, is this transaction valid? I need to run a little bit of code in order to find out. And there are different versions because you have different features supported in each. So for example, in Plutus V1 versus Plutus V2, they added the notion of reference inputs, where I don't have to spend every input to the transaction. I can just kind of point across the room to something that I want to reference, even if I'm not spending that data. And so this allows you to store, global state on chain and just point to it and say, okay, that's the settings that I want to use, for example. And that wasn't available in Plutus V1. And so when they added that feature to the ledger, they needed a new language version so that they could expose that to the scripts. The big, there's a lot of features that Plutus V2 added. It was a really kind of big step up in performance and feature set and stuff like that. But the really big important one, the one that kind of has the largest impact, is something known as reference scripts, which is, I mentioned pointing to data that you need. Well, one of the things that you can point to is the smart contract that you want to run. So you say, oh, okay, if you need the bytes in order to run this script, go run that one right there. This is in contrast to Plutus V1, where you needed to include that script in every single transaction, even if you'd run it 100,000 times before. And because of this, the ledger team thought, oh, when we release Plutus V2, everybody will migrate over and we won't have to worry about Plutus V1. And so they didn't really make it backwards compatible, where you can't run a Plutus V1 script using reference scripts. And this means that for the last 2 years, last year and a half, there's been this kind of toxic waste getting dumped onto the chain. And so, I've got a SIP that says, hey, let's just make that backwards compatible. We can't upgrade Plutus V1 scripts all the way and support every feature because they're already out there. They're already running, right? But by making just this one feature backwards compatible, we get basically 90% of the benefit, or at least 90% of the good neighbor benefit, where those contracts will stop using up other space that could be used by other protocols. In kind of, depending on when and how you measure it, this could save between 40% and sometimes even 75% of the block space in kind of peak DEX throughput times when everybody's trading on a new meme coin launch. That block space just goes away, and it's space that can be used by other transactions. So I'm really optimistic. The ledger team has committed to incorporating that in time for the next hard fork, and I think it'll make a really big positive impact on Cardano.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really good that it has been accepted in, because block space, it's always a question, should we just increase the block size? But that's limited too. You can only go so far. So if there's something, I was going to say simple, I presume it's not really simple to introduce it.
It actually is really simple. It's kind of one of those rare instances where the correct and the correct and most beneficial thing is super simple to do. So
so it's a no-brainer, because look, even you guys are going to V2 Plutus now, but there's still going to be a lot of liquidity pools, trading still happening on V1 scripts. Same for other DEXs, other platforms that have their own smart contracts. They're still going to have liquidity on the old V1 scripts that will be used probably for the next year. There's probably some of it might never move if projects have burned the keys to liquidity pools or different things like that. But jumping back into Sunday V3, then what does it look like now, or what's coming with it?
Yeah, so we've spent the last 8 or so months working on these new contracts, and both on the smart contract side and our off-chain side. We added a bunch of features to the contracts, which we can talk about in this stream. A lot of those won't be kind of available through the front end right away, right? We didn't want to kind of continue to toil away on this forever. We wanted to get it out as soon as we feasibly could. And so really, day one of our mainnet launch, you're kind of just going to see feature parity, right? Everything that you can do on V1, you can do on V3. The big standout for that is going to be the scalability improvements that it brings, which will be available from day one. we are trying to fit in like one extra feature from, at least implement that, but we'll see kind of how the timing works out. And to kind of talk about that scalability improvement, in practice, the transactions, the scoops against Sunday V1, and this is like kind of largely the same across the board for other kind of that era 1 dexes like MinSwap and Wing Riders and SundaeSwap V1, do between 2 to 4 orders per batch on average. And that's for a number of complicated reasons, largely, taking up a bunch of execution units and things like that. Sunday V3 can do, we've been confirming publicly up until now that it can do 25 orders. We always try to keep one bullet in the chamber, and so it's actually up to a maximum of 35 orders per batch, maybe even a little higher depending on conditions on the chain. And so that's a huge, like massive 10x performance increase overall. And so, during your biggest meme coin launches, you should see, if those of you who remember our launch remember the 11-day queue times for some people when you would place an order and it would only execute 11 days later, which was really painful and frustrating. And even, during meme coin summer last year, we saw queue times of, 4, 5, 6 hours, which, is not a great experience. And so even during kind of the most intense launches, you should see, little to no queue times. It's going to be, I'm really excited about that. But, so like maybe we should just do a demo of that working kind of end to end. And then we can talk about the features that, we've added to the contracts to support the, the next 2 years of the Sunday protocol, and that may not be available like day one on the UI, but that kind of set our roadmap for the kind of near future.
Yeah, so they would be like different trade types and different things you can do. Sounds good.
Yeah.
I think I have your screen here.
Yeah, cool. So for those who haven't seen our new updated portfolio page, this is it. This is available on, the mainnet UI right now. So I'll just go ahead and browse kind of the liquidity tab. And I can, right now I have it filtered to just V3 contracts. You can see kind of all of the pools, right? So one of the big things about building on Cardano is, or I mean on Web3 and blockchain, is you're trying to build something that lasts forever, right? And so we can't just abandon the V1 protocol. It'll exist there forever. And so what we're, if you browse this UI, you can see a mix of all of the different protocol versions in case you want to swap against, maybe there's a pool, like in this case, TND has the bulk of the liquidity, or a large amount of liquidity, so you might still want to trade against that V1 pool. You could also filter by which version, if in case like kind of ideologically you want to stick to V3 or whatever. Yeah, so if we go onto the exchange page, I can go ahead and just pick a token, and I could have swapped from that last page, but there's something here that I wanted to show off. Down here, you'll be able to pick which pool that you want to swap against. That actually it currently exists, but right now it's really just like picking what fee tier you want to pay. But V3 pools will be included in this, and then I can go ahead and enter in a swap. In this case, ADA for our kind of fake Arbery token. I'll go ahead. Now, one thing to point out is the DAO has actually voted to make fees quite a bit cheaper. So the way that this is another one of the features in the protocol, the way that fees work is they're a bit more dynamic than they were in V1. There is a base protocol fee that has to be collected from every scoop, and then there's an incremental fee that has to be collected from every order. And what that means is, if you are the only person swapping against the pool, you have to pay both. You pay both the base fee and the incremental fee. And the DAO has voted to set that to 1 ADA. So the maximum that you'll ever pay is 1 ADA. Now, they've also voted to have a 3-month discount when the protocol launches. So for the first 3 months, that'll actually be 0.5 ADA. So it'll actually be really cheap for people to swap and give Sunday the Sunday V3 a try.
And that's going from the current 2.5 ADA down to
yeah,
0.5.
that's compared to 2.5 ADA, basically 2.5 down to 1 with a temporary 3-month discount of 50%. And that's the protocol fee, and we'll talk a bit about that in a minute. But I said the maximum that you'll ever pay is 1 ADA. If you are included in a batch with many other orders, we can actually take that base fee and split it, kind of amortize it across everybody in the order. So, for example, the DAO voted to set that to 0.332, and if you're in an order with 35 other people, that's 0.009 ADA. So 9 thousandths of an ADA. And so in practice, you in large batches during a big token launch, you can pay as low as 0.668 ADA, or what would that be? We have 0.5 minus 0.322. Or for that 3-month period, you can pay as low as 0.168 ADA. So like as much as just the normal Cardano transaction fee you pay to the Sunday protocol. So ultimately, it can be pretty beneficial to you get that back as part of your order. Now, if you expand this right now on the preview testnet, that's 1.1 because we were just kind of playing around with some of the numbers and whatnot. But the main net values will be 1 ADA and 0.5 ADA, like I was describing.
Yeah, I think that's it's a big incentive for people to come in and trade. I know especially when new people come into Cardano and they look at what is a batcher fee, why am I paying an extra kind of 2 or 2.5 ADA for a trade to go through, and what's that on top of the transaction fee? And then you have the deposit, which we still need to keep, but you get it back. Just with the batcher fee, will I be paying 1 ADA and then I get back, because you won't know until it's actually batched how much is it going to cost? So I pay it and then I just get back whatever the amount is. Then is it the extra?
Yeah. So it kind of works like a rebate, where as it executes, there will be some surplus ADA, and that gets paid back with the result of your swap. So in this case, if I ended up paying 0.65 ADA, then the 0.35 would come back with the 35,167 SBerry.
Okay.
So I can, and that currently in the preview network or preview environment isn't shown, like if you go to your orders page, but we plan to add that so you can see kind of what you got back from that. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this swap order, and this goes through the normal, pop-up, enter my preview testnet password, and that's submitted. And so now if I go to view order, this goes to the orders page. That's currently submitted. As soon as we see that on the blockchain, it'll go to pending. And I don't, the team is always developing and things like that. And I forgot to warn them that I'm doing an interview. So, I don't know if the scooper is running right now, but you can see I have a bunch of V3 orders in the queue. And if you go and try it out, you can kind of experience it for yourself.
Yeah, I'll leave the link to it down below. I have done swaps on it a few days ago now at this point, but it does work.
Mm-hmm. And when we've stopped the load test now, but when we did our big launch, we were doing kind of a load test to put it through its paces. We weren't pushing it as hard as we could, and we actually, we didn't want to kind of leak the fact that we could do larger batches than 25. So we just had the scooper kind of have a hard cap on the number of orders it would execute in a batch. But we were pushing, between 30 and 40,000 orders per day with that load test, which is really cool because the most number of orders that have executed in a day on mainnet across all dexes has been, in the I think it's like between 20 and 25,000 orders. So that's really cool. That we can kind of push those numbers. And just to put it in comparison, we're kind of estimating if we were really pushing it, then we could do upwards of 500,000 orders per day. And that depends on what other protocols are occupying space and how lucky we get in filling in blocks. So when you compare that to something like Uniswap, which does on average 100,000 orders per day right now, those are pretty good numbers, I think.
Yeah, I look forward to the day seeing when Cardano has anything near them kind of numbers. It'll be a great day for trading for
Yeah.
Cardano.
So it looks like the scooper isn't running right now. One of our devs is probably working on it. But yeah, so that's a demo end to end. Now we can talk a little bit about kind of the other features that that we've added to the protocol that that, like I said, may not be there available day one, but they'll be supported in the smart contracts so that, other people can build using those features, or Sunday Labs can build. The relationship between the Sunday protocol and Sunday Labs is that, we're just a company writing software, and it's a decentralized protocol that anybody can interact with, right? And so we're just one of those people that are building out a UI to interact with it. And so we'll be adding those features as well. But you might see other projects like Dex Hunter or Ada Markets add those, utilize those features, which I think would be really cool to see.
Yeah, definitely. I think I see. Yeah, you have it up here.
So we've put together a little brochure where we can talk about kind of the big. I'll start with just the big themes that we've tried to hit with this protocol, and then we can go into details about what features kind of satisfy those themes. So really, it's these 6 core themes that we're focusing on. So scalability, I've talked about that a lot. It still says 25 orders, but we can bump that to 35. Extensibility, so this is the ability to add on to the protocol over time. So one of the most painful things about building in Web3 is that permanence of what you build. It's one of the best things about Web3, but it's also, one of the hardest things as a developer. And so what we've really done is tried to think carefully about where we can draw the dividing lines and add new, for example, new pool types. So we'll be launching with the kind of the standard AMM pool, but you could imagine building and launching a stable swap pool, or an 80-20 pool, or, like, for example, we've got a Catalyst proposal, which we don't know what the vote how the vote went right now, but that should be known by the time this video goes live, to implement a margin trading pool, which we think would be really cool. So we want to be able to extend the protocol in those ways, and so that's a big theme.
And just
we've also really
just on that, for people who might be wondering why you can't build it, that it can be extended, and security, I presume, is the biggest aspect there, and that control of user funds, that when you put them into a smart contract, you don't want that contract to be able to be modified. That might mean your funds could be sent out somewhere else. So that's always the risk, or that's always something that you have to be very conscious of.
Yeah, absolutely. The implicit assumption is that when you interact with a smart contract, its rules aren't going to change, right? And that's a really kind of important quality of Web3 in general. And the way that so the way to tackle that is by allowing new smart contracts that people can opt into interacting with. They can say, hey, I want to deposit liquidity into this new pool, or I want to swap against this new contract. And the challenge there is that it has to be designed carefully so that new contracts can work with the old contracts, right? Otherwise, you end up having to build a whole new set of infrastructure for every new feature that you want to add, and it's a nightmare. And so we've kind of really designed things carefully, and this is a little bit technical how we achieved that, but we've designed things really carefully so that in principle, so long as a few core invariants are maintained, like the way that you serialize the datum, you can add new order types and new pool types and things like that.
Okay.
The next big theme that we're focusing on is interoperability. So, for example, we want Sunday to be a tool in the toolbox of other developers, right? So Butane had a really cool demo of this, where when we launched our V3, they said, okay, how do we go about building and integrating with that protocol? And they built a feature really quickly within 24 hours of being able to mint a synthetic asset on their platform directly into a sell order. And now that particular example is possible on Sunday V1. It's a bit more convenient on Sunday V3, but there's a lot of other examples where we can we've put a lot of really careful thought into how would another protocol integrate with Sunday. So one example there is orders can now be owned by a script, which means that the script has to be run in order to cancel it. And so you could have something like an order that wasn't placed by Liquid Labs, but was placed by the Liquid protocol itself and was owned by the Liquid Treasury, or DAO owned orders, or things like that. And so we'll go into kind of some of the ways that we made this possible in a minute. The next big theme that we focused on is usability. So, we've had 2 years, a little over 2 years now, to watch how people are using Sunday V1 and other protocols, and the pain points that they've had, the things that projects wished they could do with a pool, things that people keep getting hurt and burned by, things that challenges within the ecosystem. And so we've designed a couple of features. The first one that we've talked about is that rebates feature, where the fees are more dynamic, that make it a lot more usable to the end user and the ecosystem. The next big theme, and this is kind of very similar to interoperability, is composability. So not only do we want to interopt with other protocols where you can have you do something on one protocol and then the results of that flow into interacting with the Sunday protocol, and the results of that flow into interacting with something else. So that's the interoperability piece. We want a composability piece. So the idea of building primitives that people can reach for when they're designing their protocols to enable to kind of embed Sunday inside of their protocol. This is kind of a subtle point, but the kind of most obvious example of this is donations. So this is a new order type, and we'll go into details on all the new order types in a minute. But donations allow, when you place a donation order, you say, hey, here is 10 ADA and 50 Arbery. Just donate that into the pool, and you don't get back an LP token. Now, this seems a little strange. The end user would not ever want to do this, right? Nobody wants to kind of donate their money. But what it does do is allow a very convenient way for other protocols to create incentive structures where, for example, maybe 10% of the revenue from their protocol is automatically, not kind of at the behest of some company or some person. 10% of the protocol revenue is provided as a donation to their pool. And so that automatically distributes it pro rata among the liquidity providers in their pool, right? And so this becomes a really powerful primitive that other projects can consider and think about when they're building their protocols or their products. And then finally, and this is maybe the smallest but also the biggest theme, is governability. And this is, we've put a lot of thought into how the Sunday protocol kind of lasts, and really, we've always been shooting for a decentralized organization that runs the protocol. And we feel like we've achieved that in a lot of ways with Sunday V1, and the protocol really does operate independently of us, and anybody can interact with it. Anybody can build features on top of the Sunday protocol, but it's not necessarily 100% there. Sunday Labs is still kind of this big face attached to the Sunday protocol, and we wanted to level up the ability for it to the Sunday protocol to survive without us, in a worst case scenario. Obviously, we still plan to be around for a long time, but this is a really big part of us committing to that long term for the Sunday protocol, And so like one example of that is all of the, there's a big chunk of the Sunday tokens that are held in a smart contract treasury, but there's also a chunk that is held in a multi-sig wallet by Sunday Labs. And so, we want that to be held by some on-chain governance protocol chosen by the DAO, something like Clarity or Summon DAO or whatever. So there will be a DAO vote either already started or in the coming days to select who that treasury should be. This is a big decision for the DAO, so we're recommending that we start small. But this also means that like the protocol revenue that the protocol generates is also going to be in that treasury and owned by that protocol, or by the DAO, and spending funds from that protocol revenue is in control of the DAO, not in control of Sunday Labs. And so we're really excited about this kind of leveling up of the decentralized aspects of the protocol. So it's a lot, and that's kind of the high level themes that we're targeting. Now, if do you have any questions? Otherwise, we can kind of move into specific features that achieve these themes.
No, I suppose it's on to, what are the features that users are going to see? What can they actually do?
Yeah. So let me switch to this other slide deck we've got that outlines the specific features. So I'll kind of just add this disclaimer. The one that I'm showing Paul right now doesn't have kind of our marketing flair. We haven't had a chance to kind of get the graphics for it. He has said that he can edit in a different one in post if I can get it to him in time, but I don't know if I'm going to get it in time. So I figured I'd just mention that here in case I didn't. Cool. So first, we've added this notion of a market open time. So when you create a pool, and this is kind of the one feature that we're going to try to get for the UI and to kind of extend the protocol from day one, is the ability to specify when trading for this pool opens. And so you can create the pool and say trading opens next Thursday, or a specific point in time. And this means that orders can all be placed, but they can't be executed. The smart contract won't allow them to be executed. And then when that market open time happens, the scoopers will process all of the orders from before the market open in a random order. And then once they've burned down that queue, they will process all of the orders from after the market open in a first come, first serve basis. And this is really to solve the problem of like sniper bots that we've seen, where somebody is watching for a token to be minted from a known wallet and watching to see the liquidity pool that gets created. And there's lots of convoluted solutions people have come up with for this, of like stealth launch or like decoy tokens and things like that. But this just solves it immediately and directly. You can create your pool. You can say, hey, everybody, here's the pool. You know what pool to trade against. You can place your orders, and you can be sure that the trading won't happen until that specific time, and then everybody gets kind of the fairest advantage because orders are processed in a random order.
I really like that idea of the random orders being executed, and it means there is no way to game. I know people say, well, how is the random order? I'm sure you will have some way to show how it is actually done randomly, and there is no gaming the system. But I really like that approach. It's different than what we've seen others doing, and off the top of my head, I can't think of a way that it can be gamed, which a lot of the other ones, you fix one solution and then there's more problems coming in that your solution causes more problems as well. But that's a really good one.
Yeah. What we will probably do is initially we will say that, the scoopers are already a trusted role. And so we trust them to select things randomly. They could process things in a different order anyway. But we will probably have some kind of commitment to the entropy that they used to determine that randomness. So whether that's the seed for their random generator, or that they include in the transaction metadata or something else. And then long term, as we kind of open up, or as the protocol evolves, that may be some kind of like, oh, it's derived from on chain and has like high entropy. That's really tricky and subtle to design how that works. And ultimately, it's going to be a, we trust them and then, double check their work system, because we don't have access to global state on Cardano. But that's kind of how we're planning to solve that. But this also, coincidentally helps. If other dexes implement this feature, it would allow somebody to say, the liquidity is going to open across all dexes at the same time. So we're hoping actually this is a feature that other dexes will implement, and that will really help users. Because what has happened to some people is, the project will create a pool on one dex, and then somebody will kind of snipe that and create like a very low liquidity pool on a different dex, and somebody will place a 100% slippage trade and get pretty injured while the team is trying to open up a pool on the other dex. So we hope this will help with that as well. Next, we have this notion of fee decay. So we have a lot of really interesting plans around the liquidity provider fee over the long term, but as a very kind of simple, what we could fit in this, we have to draw the line somewhere. We can't afford to implement all of our ideas. But what this provides is the creator of a liquidity pool can define an initial fee and then a final fee, and when it should reach that final fee, and then the fee will decay over time. So, for example, if we saw Optim do something like this, where they initially opened the pool with a 20% fee, and then 24 hours later they opened it at 10%. I forget exactly what step downs they did, but the idea here is to kind of support that naturally and say, hey, as the person opening the pool, you can decide what this curve is. In theory, you could go the other way as well. You could say, hey, the first week is going to have it's going to start at 1% fee and then increase slowly up to a 3% fee or something like that. So
yeah, I suppose with the Optum, what they done was they kept moving their own liquidity to a new pool, which was it worked, but it was confusing for people who were coming in trying to trade when they seen multiple pools and multiple fees and stuff. So again, this looks like a good solution for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, long term, we have some really interesting ideas about making the fee dynamic or having a pool manager who can set the fee. We just kind of, and that's where being able to add new pool types is really powerful. We just kind of had to draw the line somewhere and say, hey, this solves that need better than what's out there. Let's get it into the protocol, and then we can talk about more complex things over time. Next up, and this is kind of just a small detail, but and maybe I can open up Eternal and just show this feature, is LP tokens have, like, they show up nicely in wallets. So they are SIP68 tokens, and the metadata has an image attached and a nice human-friendly name. We've even attached 6 decimal places for this, which tells you roughly the value of this. It's not one for one. This doesn't mean that I have 2,000 ADA worth of liquidity, but what it does tell me is that, like, okay, at least the number of zeros is close, right? So like this is, it's not going to be worth 100,000 and it's not going to be worth $10 or 10 ADA, right? And they've got a logo, and we can even attach custom project logos to these. So right now they're just using a generic one that every token gets, but the protocol has something called a metadata administrator who can update these logos. So if a project comes and says, hey, we want a custom logo, we can set that for kind of the highest volume pairs, so that like WMT could have a version of this where the WMT logo was replacing this like outline here. So that's just kind of a nice feature, and helps with the people who are new to dexes, because previously they looked like this, right? they had this weird name that was, you know, LP and then some characters. They didn't have a logo. They had some high number of decimal places. So just a nice little detail that that kind of makes it more usable. And, you know, credit, I think it was Wing Riders that first registered their LP tokens with the Cardano token registry. So that's what inspired this idea. And then we just figured we could make them SIP68 tokens to kind of level up that process.
Nice. Yeah, I have some random tokens in old test wallets that I don't even know what DEX I provided liquidity on. I have to go to a portfolio manager, and sometimes it's able to pick it up. But
yeah,
something like that would be very useful.
Cool. So the next feature, and this is a big one, is there's this notion of a protocol treasury. So there's right now there's 4 different sources of revenue. This should actually be 5 because I realized there was an implicit one the other day that I wasn't taking into account. But every time you execute an order, we talked about, it collects fees into a treasury. The ADA that is in liquidity pools will be staked to different pools. And that's under the control of somebody called a treasury administrator, which we'll talk about in a bit. So they choose which pools to delegate to. But those staking rewards get paid into the protocol treasury. And this won't mean anything, but strategy execution also pays protocol revenue, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then pool creation. So, you know, the DAO can set a fee to open a pool. So it might say, hey, in order to create a new liquidity pool, you have to pay 100 ADA in protocol fees. We'll probably launch with that set to 0. It'll be up to the DAO, but it's an option there for the DAO to say, hey, you know, Sunday is popular enough. We want to avoid like just really spammy pools. We want a little bit of extra protocol revenue. You know, let's charge 100 ADA or 1,000 ADA or whatever it is for pool creation. We also have ideas on how to allow the protocol to also subsidize specific pools. So they can kind of, the DAO could negotiate specific deals with really like highly anticipated tokens and things like that. All of these are, first, they're collected into a liquidity pool, and then the treasury administrator can withdraw those into the actual DAO-controlled treasury. And that's just an efficiency thing. You don't want to be paying 1 ADA at a time so that you have like 100,000 UTXOs that you have to collect up. It kind of gathers them up, and then when it reaches, say, 10,000 ADA, you can pay that 10,000 ADA to the treasury. The treasury administrator can't actually do anything else with those funds. Asterisk, and we'll talk about the asterisk in a little bit. So I think this is really cool because, you know, so far the Sunday protocol collects a 2.5 ADA fee, and that gets paid out to the scoopers. But the protocol itself isn't collecting any revenue and isn't kind of accumulating any value. And so this will represent, you know, now it has revenue streams, which I think is really important. Cool. Another feature is we have optional pool routing. So in the V1 protocol, when you create your order, you specify exactly which pool you want to execute against. So you say, oh, I want to execute against pool 08. And that's the ADA Sunday pool with the most liquidity. There are times, though, and we've seen this with aggregators, where you don't necessarily want to specify which pool you want to execute against, because either you would value speed over like price, right? Oh, there's a big backlog, though, you know, hopefully there won't be too many big backlogs with the new scalability. And I would be okay with executing against a different pool so long as I got at least this many tokens. Or maybe the price is changing rapidly and you want to say, hey, I trust the scoopers to select the pool that gives me the best price. And so there's, you know, you don't have, you can pin it down to a specific pool if you want, but you don't have to. You can leave it open, and then the pool will say, okay, so long as they're getting the token they want and the amount of the token that they want, we can route it to a different pool to kind of balance load or to give the user a better price or things like that. Next up is this notion of a order owner. So the owner of an order is a rich structure. This can be something, most of the time it's just going to be the user's wallet address, and that means if you sign it with the user's wallet address, they can cancel or update the order. But big organizations might want multi-sig. So we're going to place a 100,000 ADA order, and we want that to be controlled by a 3 of 5 multi-sig, so that somebody doesn't, that the one person controlling that wallet doesn't cancel it and run off with the funds. And even the structure allows specifying a script that owns the order. And so this would be like, you can attach a script that says, if you cancel this order, it must be paid back to this DAO treasury, as opposed to having to pick somebody that is trusted to execute that order and kind of having it temporarily be in their custody. And so, protocols themselves can place orders that, so for example, something like Indigo or Liquid could build into their protocol arbitrage between their protocol and Sunday using swaps, which we think is really, really exciting as an opportunity for people to build on top of Sunday. Next up is this notion of order extensions. So there's a field on each order where you can kind of arbitrarily extend it with extra data. So for example, I was talking about a script owner. Maybe you want to have a script that says this order can only be canceled if it's sent back to this address. And you put the address that you want it to be sent back to in this extension data. And so basically, the pool contract never thinks or never looks at this data, so it can be any structure that you want. This also means that if we implement a new order type, something like, oh, this is an order with expiration, and so the order can't be executed after an expiration date, then you can put that expiration date in the extension data. And we think this will be really
could it be auto canceled then and sent back to that user after the expiry time, or would they
in theory, yeah, somebody would have to run the cancellation bot basically, but yeah, absolutely, you could have it so that the script that you attach says, or the order contract says, hey, somebody can collect the scooper fee that was attached to this by canceling the order for them. So we think this will be really cool. Now, we can extend orders with new order types, but obviously the scoopers need to be aware of which contracts are order contracts and not. So it's not just like anybody can write anything and it executes against the thing. In reality, what will probably happen is somebody, whether it be Sunday Labs or somebody else, will say, hey, we wrote this new order contract, and they will present it to the DAO and say, hey, will you vote to make this one of the approved order types? And then somebody would implement it into the scooper software, and the Sunday Labs would go and update our backend indexing so that we watched for those orders and things like that. So it's not necessarily like a free-for-all where any order automatically works against the protocol, which could be a little bit dangerous, but this means that somebody like Dex Hunter, for example, they're doing a lot of really cool things, and I'm sure Ada Markets, Paul, for you, has plans to do something similar where you can write your own new order types directly for the Sunday protocol instead of having to do kind of this two-tier system where first you place it in one order and then it executes into another order and then executes against the pool.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 3 new order types. I talked about this one a little bit earlier. This one is called donation. And it, like I said, it's a really good way for other protocols to build incentive programs that integrate with the protocol. And so it's just, it's also designed to be composable. So if I put 10,000 ADA into UTXO, I can say, oh, this is an order where I'm just donating 10 of that ADA. And then the rest gets paid to the destination, which might be some other contract. So you could, for example, if you had 10 different pools you were trying to distribute to, you could say, okay, well, here's 1,000 ADA. I'm going to donate 100 ADA to each of these 10 pools. and kind of chain it through each of them. So we're looking forward to see what people build with that. The second new order type is called Oracle. So in theory, anybody can build a protocol that uses the Sunday pool as a reference input to say, okay, here's the current price. And so you might build like, you know, you need to consider the depth of liquidity, and you might want to, you know, make sure that you aggregate multiple sources or whatever. But in principle, you can use the pool UTXO as a kind of pseudo oracle, a source of data for on-chain trading information. The problem with that, especially if the user needs to sign that transaction, is that the pool UTXO is constantly getting spent. And so if you build a transaction for a user that makes reference to the pool UTXO, it's going to be spent by the time they can sign it in their wallet, and it'll be painful. So what an Oracle order type allows is kind of you pay the protocol fee, and it creates a snapshot with a NFT with a particular policy ID that you can then use that UTXO to build your transaction. And that snapshot will never, you know, it's not going to get spent until you spend it to burn the UTXO and reclaim the minimum ADA. And so, you know, other protocols can use this as an oracle. Charlie3 or OrcFax could use it as one of their data sources in their aggregation to produce like an aggregated oracle. It allows you to calculate both the price and the value of LP tokens. So it will tell you the circulating supply. And so you can take somebody's LP tokens and say, okay, this is worth roughly 100 ADA and so many Arbery. So this is, again, one of those ways that other protocols can interoperate with and use Sunday as a building block for what they need. And then finally, kind of drum roll. Wait, go ahead. You looked like you were going to say something.
No, go on. Go ahead. I'll let you finish.
Yeah, so drum roll, I've saved what I think is the best for last. You know, the feature that I'm most excited about is a new order type called strategies. And so this, you know, I always try to give credit where it's due. This is, you know, very inspired by Axo's programmable swaps. It's not the same thing. So, you know, before they, the communities in crypto can be sensitive. So I want to give credit to them for what they do, and I also want to, you know, point out the differences. I don't think either one is better or worse. I think we make different trade-offs that better fit the Sunday protocol than, you know, what Axo built, and I think that's totally great. But basically, what this allows you to do is say, hey, I'm going to leave the details of my order unspecified, right? So normally, what you do is you place you know, 1,000 ADA, and you say, I want to swap this for at least, you know, 10 million Arbery or 10,000 Arbery or whatever it is at the time. But that means that you're kind of pre-committing to those details. What strategies allow you to do is leave that blank. So you can say, hey, I don't want to specify the details of my order. Now, obviously, without details to your order, it can't execute. So it's just a UTXO sitting there on chain. But what it does allow you to do is kind of, according to your own logic, decide later what those order details will be, sign those order details, and transmit that to the scoopers using something like a decentralized communication network. We're thinking about using Nostr for that. And then when the scooper receives that, those signed details, they can then include that in the transaction and say, look, you know, this is a strategy order, you know, this is to the pool contract. They can tell the pool contract, this is a strategy order, and here's the signed details. So go ahead and execute according to this. And this is an incredibly powerful primitive that we expect people to do really cool things with. It allows, for example, let me place 10,000 ADA into a UTXO, and then every week I build the datum that says buy 100 ADA worth of this token. So you get dollar cost averaging, right? Kind of just natively, if you're willing to run an agent that kind of builds and submits these orders. You can also implement trailing stop losses. You can implement something that says, I'm going to roll a dice, and then depending on what it comes up, I'm going to buy one of these random tokens. You could implement something that looks at Twitter sentiment analysis for a token and then buys based on that. Some of the trade-offs that we make compared to something like programmable swaps is, the details are less enforced on chain, right? As far as I understand it, with Axe's programmable swaps, they have a whole DSL for describing the conditions under which your order can be filled, which means you don't need to communicate with them later to execute your order, right? They've got their own kind of batching agent that Axo runs that says, okay, we're going to decide what to execute, and the smart contract just keeps it according to the rules that the user specified. And so I think that's really cool. I don't want to kind of put them down, but it also, puts Axo in a little bit more control, and is a huge surface area to design and make free of bugs and things like that. Whereas with this, all of the logic for how to execute is off chain, right? And so you have a little bit more flexibility. You don't need something that can be enforced on chain. You can just say, like the Twitter sentiment analysis, for example. But you do need to trust somebody to execute that order. Now, it could be an agent you're running yourself, right? Maybe you download a program to run the agent. Maybe you run it in your browser. Or maybe there are entities that you trust. Maybe you trust ADA markets to execute something on your behalf, or something like that. We've put a lot of thought into where that threat model and what the boundaries of that threat model are. So, for example, you're not trusting somebody with your funds in the sense that they can't cancel the order and take the funds for themselves. They can't change the destination, like where the result of the swap has to be sent. And they can't change what pool you're executing against. So they can't say, oh, you specified that you wanted to swap against the ADA Sundae pool, but we're actually going to buy a bunch of this dumb meme token. So you can put boundaries in place. But they could they could execute a 100% slippage trade order that right as the price crashes, right? And so they can do dumb things, and so you have to trust them to do that, but they can't necessarily just run away with your money. So it's somewhere between full custody and self-sovereignty, which we think will open up a lot of possibilities for other projects building on SundaeSwap. So we think this is really exciting. We're really excited for what we're going to build leveraging this feature, and we're really excited to see what other people build leveraging this feature.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting one. And it came into my mind about the agent and trusting them. Like, if you trust the wrong person, then they could set your order to buy whatever token, even whatever token you had it set against the pool, to buy into that 100% slippage at the same time that they put in a sell order for them to make profits on it. But just on the agent, so would that be basically a bot that runs in the background, whether it's something you set up yourself or someone else you trust to set it up? Is that what the agent would be?
Yeah. So it's basically anything that can build the datum that you want to execute and send it to the scoopers. So it can be written in any programming language. It can be run anywhere that you can run code and communicate on a network. So, for example, you could implement one that maybe you want something that is very short-lived, and you say, okay, I want to place this strategy, and then sometime in the next 30 minutes execute when the biggest volume goes through, or when it triggers this volume threshold or something. That could be something that you just have the user run in their browser, right? So they use their own key, the browser sits there monitoring the conditions, and then executes and submits the datum. And so then there's no trust involved. The user is the one running that code. You could also build things that people can run on their own servers. So this is for the more advanced user, somebody who kind of is going to provide that infrastructure. and wants to run a more complex strategy to execute either a swap, or you could do concentrated liquidity where you are depositing while the price is within a certain range and withdrawing once it leaves that range. So it's not exactly like Uniswap's concentrated liquidity, but it is kind of an approximation of that. Similarly, you could also have a setup where there's somebody that you trust, like Ada Markets, or maybe Sunday Labs, or whatever, that is executing those strategies on your behalf. And then you could have the protocol level thing where a protocol itself, like Indigo, places a strategy order, and then Indigo Labs is running the order to like arbitrage or buy and sell an I asset, and that's protocol, like the results of that are owned by the Indigo protocol themselves, and it's just Indigo Labs that is in charge of deciding what to execute, but the actual funds themselves are owned by the Indigo Treasury. So lots of really, really, really cool possibilities, and like it allows you to choose your own risk tier, and it allows you to choose your own programming model, right? Like what language you want to write in, and it allows you to do things that are not purely on chain, that are kind of more based on off chain stuff. It also allows you to keep it secret, right? So like one of the trade-offs, again, people are touchy. I really like what Axo has done, and they just went live yesterday for when we're recording this, so congrats to them. I'm every time I talk about another protocol, I sometimes get accused of being of bashing them, but like it's just a trade-off that they've made where the strategy that you build and put on chain is public, and sometimes people are going to want to build off-chain private strategies, and maybe they have a solution for that, but this is something that we've also accomplished.
Yeah, I think things like stop losses and trailing stops or take profits, things like that would be good to be able to hide from the chain, so that someone else can't build a bot that monitors all the contracts to see where are all the stop losses at, to try and push it below them prices and do some arb trades there. I'm conscious of time now that we're getting on. There's a lot of really good stuff there. I think we'll probably have to do another session, maybe on the strategy stuff alone. But what's the timeline on this? Where are we, or when can we actually try these things out on mainnet?
Yeah, so obviously we've got preview launched, and so that's kind of the bulk of the work. There's some things that we want to clean up, some extra features that we want to add. Right now you can't create pools in preview, so we got to implement that for mainnet, for example. We're in audit. So we're getting audited by the brilliant TX Pipe, and that's been going fantastically. They're super thorough, but they're also not like finding a ton of things. So like it's kind of that really good balance of like, I feel like they're shaking the rug really hard, but we didn't make a bunch of silly trivial mistakes. So that feels really good. It's kind of just up to how long that development takes. And so I'm not going to commit to any specific timeline. I've become allergic to timelines over the last 3 years, but it feels very close. You can see it, you can use it. Most of our off-chain infrastructure is upgraded to work with it. We're working really hard to make it happen.
Nice. Yeah. Well, for anyone watching, you can be sure as soon as we do have timelines or anything like that, I'll include them in some of my update videos. I'll put the links to SundaeSwap socials down below. That's probably a good place to follow as well. Anything we missed today, Pi, or anything we should have included?
Yeah, there's just a feature that I thought of that isn't in this slideshow, but maybe I'll keep that as a bullet in the chamber.
Okay.
It's in the white paper, so go read the white paper.
So if people want to see what that one is, they have to look at it. White paper will be linked down below. Thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you got some value from this. Share it out. Let people know what is coming to SundaeSwap, what's there now, and Cardano in general. And subscribe if you're new. I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Thanks as always.
Thanks for having me on the channel.